Ginault Expeditioner, because I really don't like Mercedes hands and Cyclops. Ginault Expeditioner, because the thought of spending 5 figures on a watch just sounds downright irresponsible. Ginault Expeditioner, because, oh my gosh, feel that bezel action. Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today, yes, we are talking about the Ginault Expeditioner. Now, if you're not a fan of premium homage watches, then there is a good chance that this might not be the watch for you, and there's plenty of wholly original designs on the channel that you can go and check out. But if you're curious about Ginault, just like I was, to see just how much you can get for your money in the premium homage segment, then I would recommend sticking around. Let's be crystal clear on this one. I bought this watch with my own money, no subsidies, no freebies, none of that YouTube stuff. I have never had a Ginault before, so I went in with an open mind, and I guess some expectations off of other reviewers, but yeah, not entirely sure what I was going to get. Anyway, enough waffling, let's get straight into the Expeditioner. As always, we'll rattle through some specs, and we'll rattle through them because we've got a lot to get through today. So this is a 40mm diameter case, and of course you will recognise the case from another very famous brand. 20mm lug width, 47mm is the lug to lug, and 11.5mm thick. So this is a thin watch that I think actually works pretty well even with a shirt. What else is there? Well, it's 300 meters of water resistant, and the bezel is ceramic, not platinum, I'm afraid, at this price point. Now, of course, as I alluded to in the introduction, this is not an original design, although it has some original elements, and let's say it modifies a design in a way that I really appreciate. So we'll look a little bit closer at this watch, and starting with the dial. Now, there's various colors you can get on the Expeditioner. You can go for black, white, blue, or there is a really unique and quite beautiful cherry blossom. But I just wasn't sure how much I would wear the cherry blossom and if the novelty would wear off. And that's why I went with this lovely but familiar blue colorway. Now, it's a really nice sunburst blue, and it's got a lot of depth to it. In low light, it does appear almost black, and then once you get under direct light, the sunburst and the blue really comes alive, and it's very elegant and very premium looking. Now, I guess the biggest change from the watch that this homages is the indices and the hands, and those sword hands I think look absolutely fantastic on this, and they are diamond cut and rhodium plated, both the hands and the indices, so they're very, very sharp in a good way. You can opt to have this watch with or without the Cyclops. I go for without the Cyclops because I'm really not a fan of Cyclops on any watch, nor Mercedes hands. As I mentioned, I don't have a single watch in my collection with Mercedes hands just because I really can't stand them. Date window is at the 3 o'clock, and the date wheel has a red font on it which matches the seconds hand as well, with that nice splash of red. It's a good contrast, it's a good colorway. You've seen the colorway elsewhere, but nonetheless, it's done very well here by Ginault. For me personally, there's too much text on the dial. Obviously, I bought the watch knowing that, it's not a surprise. I would prefer a little bit less, it's a personal preference. I understand, again, the watch that it's homaging also has a lot of text on the dial, but for me, I tend to prefer something slightly cleaner. Now, if you're paying attention, you'll see at the 6 o'clock it says hand built in America. And what does that actually mean? Well, let's go through this. So the mid case, the case back, the crown, and the bezel are CNC'd in the USA. The mid case and the bezel are then hand finished in the USA. The indices on this one are riveted to the dial by hand in the USA, but the gaskets, the O-ring, the bracelet assembly, the crystal, and the bezel insert are all imported from Asia. So you have some parts coming from Asia, some parts coming from America, and then the assembly being completed in America. I like the openness and the transparency on this from Ginault, and I have a feeling that the nefarious claims made against the brand in 2019 might have had something to do with the openness now on the construction that they talk about. Now you can do your own research on that, I'm not going to go into it, it's been done to death on YouTube. And it was quite a long time ago now. We're in 2025, and my perspective is that since these claims came about in 2019, Ginault's continued to produce watches. Everyone that I know has had one has been a satisfied customer, and the brand is still going strong. So for me, it's a good time to give Ginault a go, and I was happy to put my money and my trust into Ginault as a brand. Now back into the watch, and the movement on this one is a Sellita SW200-1 Elaborate grade. And that Sellita is properly regulated. I'm talking multiple positions over a period of time, over different temperature ranges, and you get the results sheet with the watch when you buy it. Now I've got to admit, I made a bit of a mistake. Let's call it a learning experience. So my watch was out in a deep freeze in -25 here in Calgary. And it turns out that even when you've thawed a watch inside and it seems to be at room temperature, it can still take a couple of days to recover the timing. And that is what happened with my Ginault. I initially thought something was out with the timing. I ended up regulating it myself again after 24 hours, which is really easy on the SW200. Lovely little screw adjustment. And then another 24 hours later, I had to put it back to where Ginault had regulated it to get the cost performance. So weirdly, it seemed to have some sort of freezing weather hangover, but I can certainly report since then it's been keeping excellent time, and it gains around 2 seconds a day on my wrist, and that is tried and tested now over multiple days without a deep freeze. One of the things I love about this watch, and one of the reasons I'm often staring at it, is all of the facets, especially on the bezel insert and the bezel, really make it shimmer and sparkle, and it just looks awesome. Hopefully it comes across on camera, but I can't tell you how elegant and classy this really does look in real life. The head of this watch is really, really beautiful, and even though it is very much a homage watch, you have to put a lot of effort in to make a watch look like this under close inspection. And I wasn't joking in the opening to this video about the bezel action on this. This is definitely the best bezel action I've ever felt. It is ridiculously good. There's no such thing as backplay, total accuracy, clarity on the clicks, but they don't sound cheap or tinny. Everything just feels unbelievably refined on this bezel action. And the crystal, I think, is not far off Breitling clarity. I would say it's a fantastic piece of glass, and the AR is superb. And even in my outdoor shots, these are outside with some clouds in the sky, and there's barely anything there. That's the worst conditions, by the way, that will really push any AR coating to its absolute limits. And yeah, the clarity is superb. The viewing angles are fantastic. The crystal, the bezel insert, like these are real top tier parts on this watch. There is a lot to like here. And it doesn't stop just there. The crown is also fantastic. It's very grippy, but it's very smooth. There's no sharp edges on it. The Ginault logo on the side is clearly defined. You'll see there is fully polished sides on this and polished chamfers, which are all very nice in the light, but of course they will scratch quickly, but you know that when you buy the watch. And on the top of the case lugs, there is a more coarse brushing, which originally I wasn't sure about because you get so used to fine brushing on watches that are made today. But this is a nod to the 5-digit subs of old. And actually looking at pictures of 5-digit subs, I've not had one personally in my hands, and then looking at the brushing on the top of this, where it's a slightly more coarse hand-applied finish. By the way, it's not rough, it's still smooth to the touch. But yes, it absolutely is just like those 5-digit subs. It's something that I didn't initially pick up on, and I did have to ask someone in the Facebook group for Ginault to get the answer on. And what about the loom? Well, absolutely excellent loom. It's one of the best applications of, I think, BGW9 that I've seen. It's strong, it's long lasting. Of course, BGW9 never has that initial punch that you get from the Super Luminova, but over a period of time, this holds its glow phenomenally well. Now I'll show you the case back on this watch, and the style is vaguely similar to the watch that it homages. There's not much to say on that. And the bracelet I haven't spoken too much about because in terms of design, I mean, you're very familiar with it. It is the O style bracelet with the polished center links, which you've probably seen a million times before. Screw pins are well machined. They provide you with a really nice screwdriver in the box that means you don't mangle the heads. I put a bit of Loctite in on all of these screws anyway, just to be safe. There is a quick adjust, which you'll be familiar with the design of, again, if you've seen the watch that it's homaging. And the polished center links on this, I don't think they're quite at the same standard as the head of the watch, but they're still plenty sufficient. And the bracelet looks great, although obviously, again, caveat to anything that's polished, you are going to pick up scratches just by looking at those links. So it all sounds overwhelmingly positive, but despite the things that this watch does very well, there are a few areas where I feel it could be improved. So the first thing I'm going to point out is the bracelet, and we're going to go down to the clasp. And although everything feels very premium in the hand, even without macro on the camera lens and without studio lights, I can still tell with my eyes that the polishing on the milled clasp is of a lower standard than of the bracelet links and the head of the watch. And there's kind of, you'll see it with the light, the reflection there, you can see a rough texture. It looks to me like it needs a bit more heavy polishing and then a fine polish to be done once the surface underneath is smooth. Now these bracelets are imported, they're not finished by Ginault, so maybe it's something that could be picked up with the supplier for future. I know previously I think they've done a lot of bracelets with brushing, and if it was brushed, you definitely wouldn't notice this. Next up is a very minor point, because it's very difficult to see with the human eye. I picked it up with my jewelry inspection light and with macro, and that is that there's a couple of really tiny, like let's say micro flea bites on one of the chamfers. Now I didn't approach Ginault about this because it is so small and so difficult to pick up with the human eye, but they are there and they are slight imperfections in the case. And these are something that I picked up on before I even sized the watch or put it on wrist. This is straight out the box and under my desk light. Next point is the spring bar cutouts are actually really rather sharp. It doesn't affect the performance on the wrist, it doesn't catch on my wrist, and it provides no discomfort whatsoever. It's just noticeable if you run your finger or your thumb over those spring bar cutouts. They are, yeah, really rather sharp. And the final point, which I've experienced with a lot of watches that have polished center links and keepers on the clasp, when you pop the keeper open, as you knock it back 3 or 4 times, it does tend to scratch the polished center link quite easily where it impacts it. I think if you polish this edge and smoothed it a little bit, it would reduce this quite a lot, but it's just worth to bear in mind as you take the watch on and off, it's hard to kind of avoid scratching up that center link that has direct contact with the keeper. So in conclusion, and this is the second time I've recorded this because I had to think how to summarize the Ginault best, and I'm going to do it in the form of a comparison, and this with my green Prospex Seiko GMT diver. Now both of these watches are a similar price range. The Seiko is around $1,500 US, but you're probably going to get a bit of discount on that. Both of them are stunning watch heads. They're both beautifully finished, they have different strengths, but they both are very premium, very elegant looking dive watches. And when you take a moment to think about the resources that the Seiko group has versus the resources that a small brand like Ginault has, and being able to build all of the watch in-house, then I think it's so impressive what Ginault have on offer here. I do think that both watches at their full price, the Seiko the 1500 and the Ginault when it leaves its pre-order price, should make a little bit of improvement to the clasps, the Seiko because it's rattly, and the Ginault just purely on the polishing there. And by the way, I emailed John over at Ginault with my feedback on the clasp, and he offered to send me a replacement as well. So you can't say fairer than that, can you? I don't think I'd be getting that kind of service from Seiko. But isn't it remarkable that this is my favourite Seiko ever, and this Ginault not only holds its own, but in many places beats the Seiko in terms of quality and attention to detail. I think that pretty much says everything that I want to say about the Ginault. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed today's video, please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon for alerts when I upload. And I hopefully will catch you on the next video. Cheers.